my temper coming back. This fucking thing on my fucking lip. I'm gonna fucking... It's fucking big on my fucking lip. It's fucking driving me crazy. I'm so fucking ill.
This is the voice of Jack Sepple, a 23-year-old man from Essex just outside of London. Ashley Wadsworth flew 4,500 miles from Canada to meet Jack, whom she had been talking with on the internet for nearly 10 years. Ashley dreamed of a man she would spend the rest of her life with. Tragically, she would be right, because less than 4 months after meeting Jack Sepple, she would be dead. Many of you watching this will have children and access to the internet. You are about to find out what happens when the two combine with horrific consequences. After listening to this case, you may think twice about what your children are doing and who they are talking to on the internet. Before we begin, we would like to send our sincere condolences to all of the family and friends of Ashley Wadsworth. From about the age of 11 or 12, Ashley Wadsworth had been in an online relationship with a man she had never met and who was 4 years her senior. Now, of course, had this been a face-to-face relationship, it would have been illegal because Ashley was so young and below the age of consent. But such is the modern world where the internet is the center of so many people's lives. It was legal. Ashley, born on the 25th of July 2002 in Vernon, British Columbia. Her parents had divorced when she was very young. However, the divorce seems to have been amicable as both her mother and father were still devoted to their children before anything else. Growing up, Ashley lived with her mother and her older sister, Haley. Vernon, British Columbia offers a lot of benefits. It is a safe and tight-knit community where people live happily. But for a young person, it could be considered a little claustrophobic, offering little in terms of excitement and adventure, something that a lot of young people want. Ashley was no different. Although she loved her hometown and family, she always wanted to see more of the world and had no intention of staying in one place her whole life. Ashley was described by her family as the backbone that held them all together with an unforgettable laugh and smile. From the age of 14, Ashley was blossoming into a very talented young woman. She worked hard at school and aspired to become a lawyer, but she also worked hard out of school, doing various jobs to earn herself spending money. It was said that Ashley had it all. She was good-looking, intelligent, spoke 3 languages, generous, and excelled at sports, especially her ability for skiing, which seemed unparalleled amongst those that she knew. Ashley maximized all of the gifts that God had given her and had already made plans for her future. The world was to be her oyster. By the age of 18, Ashley had been accepted into a university and had become rather religious, choosing the Church of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormon Church. Would be said that Ashley's main and possibly only weakness was love. More specifically, the love she felt for Jack Sepple. It is unclear if Ashley knew, but Jack was seeing other people the whole time the pair was communicating. That's hardly surprising given that they were 4,500 miles apart, but Ashley wasn't. She was devoted to Sepple, either because of her naivete or her genuine feelings for what could be her first love. Jack had wooed Ashley from a young age, always being overly nice to her and even regularly posting presents out to Canada for her. Ashley had been so taken in by Jack that after 8 years of communicating with him over the internet and by phone, she decided she wanted to make the trip to England for herself. From her perspective, even if things didn't go to plan with Jack, at least she would fulfill one of her other ambitions, that is, to see other places in the world. So in a way, it was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Ashley's drive and determination had to be admired. Naturally, her parents were worried about her, but she wasn't a child anymore. She was a young woman who wanted to see the world, so there wasn't anything they could really do about it. Ashley knew what she wanted and was determined enough to make her own way in the world. After gaining her family's shaky approval, Ashley's father drove her to the airport on the 12th of November 2021 to fly to Great Britain. Remember, her father, just like her mother, doted on Ashley and her sister. For Ashley's father, it was heartbreaking, that parting of ways, even though he believed it to be temporary. They embraced and kissed each other goodbye. Ashley walked into the airport terminal, luggage in hand, waving one last cheery goodbye to her father before disappearing into the hordes of travelers in the terminal. Neither of them could have known at the time, but Ashley and her father had just bid farewell, their final time, and they would never see each other alive again. Of course, Ashley believed that she was pursuing love and a new adventure. After almost a decade of talking to Jack Sepple, she was no doubt excited. But the truth was, like most people who meet on the internet, it is impossible to know what the other person is really like until you meet them face to face. Ashley was about to find out who her boyfriend really was. Only in his early 20s, Jack Sepple already had 8 criminal convictions for abusing his former girlfriends. Most of the convictions were for domestic violence, and 2 of his former partners had been forced to take out restraining orders against him. Perhaps most shocking of all, Sepple's own mother had taken out a restraining order against him. That was because of the abuse he subjected her to, including smashing up her car and home. In 2019, Sepple breached the restraining order against his mother and continued his abuse. His mother had no choice but to call the police, and Jack was sent to a youth offenders institute for 8 weeks. What lies he told to keep his relationship going with Ashley was unclear. Tragically for Ashley, she had no idea what she was walking into. Jack Sepple was a coward and a predator. You'll notice that his criminal record did not contain a single altercation with any males, just females. He actively sought out people he believed to be physically weaker than him. No doubt, had he the guts to face a man of his own size, he could possibly have been taught a lesson. Having landed safely in England, Ashley met Jack Sepple right away and went to stay with him in his 1-bedroom flat in Chelmsford. At best, it was naive of Ashley to live with someone she did not properly know so quickly. But then again, she is a young woman in a strange country who was offered somewhere seemingly safe to stay, so one can understand her logic. At first, everything seemed fine. Essex is not far from London, and Ashley had longed to see the capital and all that it had to offer. The couple uploaded pictures to social media outside of various attractions, including the most famous prison in the world, the Tower of London, and Buckingham Palace, looking very happy together. While in the UK, Ashley kept in constant contact with her concerned family, who, by this time, had become a bit more relaxed about the situation. Ashley told them how kind and considerate Jack was towards her, and what a good time she was having. That helped to put their minds at ease. But after the first few days of exploring, the experience started to lose its appeal a little. Jack was unemployed and living on welfare. Presumably, he had used what little money he had to travel to London, or perhaps he had persuaded Ashley to pay. Either way, after a short time, the only thing Jack could afford to do was sit in his flat all day with Ashley. Surely, from her point of view, this was not the adventure she had dreamed of. Ashley wanted to visit new places in the UK, London, Manchester, Edinburgh, and she wanted to see such attractions as Stonehenge, the art galleries, museums, not to be trapped in a poky little flat in Essex. As we know, Ashley was intelligent and nobody's fool. However, maybe unwittingly, she had put herself in a difficult position. She was in a strange place where she knew no one. She was staying with a guy who had not lived up to her expectations. She had nowhere else to stay, and for all she knew, if she said the wrong thing, she could be made homeless. During the Christmas period, it became apparent that Jack had serious issues. His mood swings were completely unpredictable, and one day even took an overdose, for which Ashley had to phone for an ambulance. Following Jack's discharge from hospital, people who knew him noticed how his behavior had changed around Ashley. He was being coercive and controlling towards her. By now, contact between Ashley and her family and friends had become less frequent. This was because Jack had taken control of her social media accounts. She wasn't allowed to contact anyone back in Canada without his say-so. He changed her passwords and even deleted numerous posts she had put up. By now, if Ashley wanted to speak to her family, she had to do it quietly without Jack overhearing. Even from 4,500 miles away, her family knew something was wrong. Ashley would whisper during conversations and even told family that he hit her around the head with a glass. Her family was obviously frantic with worry and probably felt completely helpless with her being so far away. Ashley knew what was happening was wrong because she made video diaries of each incident and injury that she was subjected to. But even when her family begged her to come home, she said she didn't want to and everything was fine. We can't be sure why she was adamant that she wanted to stay with Jack. Maybe it was because she had been speaking to him for so long that she didn't want to give up on the possibility of a relationship. Maybe it was because she was young and just didn't fully understand that it was not normal behavior. Or maybe she didn't want to prove her parents right by coming home and admitting that the whole thing had been a big mistake. After all, what teenager wants to make that admission to their parents? On Tuesday, the 1st of February 2022, a loud, blood-curdling scream is heard coming from the flat on Tennyson Road. Ashley is seen running out of the flat, screaming and crying. The neighbor next door hears the commotion and comes outside. Ashley explains that Jack had picked up the couple's kitten and thrown it against a wall. The neighbor is sympathetic, but there wasn't a great deal she could do about it. Ashley then makes a huge mistake. She returns to the flat inside with Jack. Jack was in the middle of smashing up the flat when he spots Ashley, who he then physically beat badly. After the horrific beating, Ashley walked out of the flat and back to the neighbor. She explained how frightened she was that Jack was going to kill her. The reason this whole incident had taken place was because Jack had seen Ashley looking at a picture of a woman on her phone. Not that it really matters why, of course. There is no excuse for any man beating a woman this way. By now, the neighbor can see the severity of the situation and tells Ashley to stay with her while she calls the police. But shockingly, like so many abused people in this type of situation, Ashley refuses to get the police involved for fear of getting Jack in trouble. Sadly, the neighbor went along with Ashley, but we also can't blame her. She was very concerned for Ashley's safety, but had also developed a relationship with Ashley, and she trusted her. She probably didn't want to destroy that trust. Instead, the neighbor went back into the flat with Ashley to speak to Sepple. Jack Sepple, as you might imagine, was unreservedly apologetic. He swore that he would not harm Ashley again and that she was perfectly safe with him. This demonstrates to us that Sepple was simply an awful man. Later that same day, the neighbor, who had returned home by now, had a hospital appointment to attend. But something made her feel clearly uncomfortable about the situation next door. As a result, she knocked on their door just to check that everything was relatively calm. At first, there was no answer at the door, so she shouted through the letterbox and did get a response from Jack stating that they were in bed and everything was fine. The neighbor seemed convinced and probably didn't want to interfere, so she went off to her appointment. It seems, however, that Ashley finally was less convinced. The physical beating she had suffered was the final straw. She got straight on the phone to her family, who said they wanted her to come home straight away, and eventually Ashley agreed. Within an hour, Ashley's grandmother had booked a flight home which was due to leave in 2 days' time on February the 3rd. Unfortunately, due to COVID tests being required at the time, that was the earliest flight they could get. But tragically, Ashley would make the fatal error of telling Jack she was leaving. As most therapists would say, the most dangerous and unpredictable moment for an abuser is when they believe they're losing control of their victim. Ashley was now regaining control of the situation and retaking her independence by leaving Jack, which would have tragic consequences. Whatever Jack's reaction to Ashley saying that she was going home, it was clearly not a positive one. While in England, Ashley had managed to make a few friends in the local Mormon Church she attended regularly. Although she couldn't access her own social media accounts, Jack having changed the passwords, she was able to access his account instead. Ashley quickly shot off a message to two of her friends from the church telling them that she needed their help. It was an emergency and they should come right away and get her. This was followed by another message a couple of hours later stating that everything was fine and she was going to get her COVID test and go home. Despite the message saying that everything was okay, the friends were convinced and still went around to check on Ashley that afternoon. Ashley's friends were right to be concerned. In case you hadn't guessed, the second message was actually sent by Sepple, not Ashley. The two friends repeatedly banged on the front door and shouted through the letterbox without reply, but they could hear someone moving around inside. Finally, at 4:01 p.m., the friends called the police. British police often get criticized for the way they operate, but in this case, they were impeccable. As they enter the property, they dash around from room to room trying to find a young woman inside who needed their help and protection. But tragically, they were too late. The officers entered the bedroom to discover the body of a young woman surrounded by a sea of blood-stained sheets. Ashley Wadsworth had been stabbed approximately 90 times. Her so-called boyfriend, Jack Sepple, unbelievably, was in the process of FaceTiming with his own sister with the lifeless body of Ashley in the background. Jack tries to explain the scene away with a simple apology. He says that he went psychotic, strangled, and then stabbed her, and that he was sorry. Jack's pathetic excuse for an apology went almost unnoticed by the attending police officers. One of them arrested him while the others set for calling an ambulance and administering CPR on poor Ashley in a forlorn attempt to keep her alive. Paramedics arrived swiftly and they did everything they could to try to bring Ashley back, but it was hopeless. Her fragile young body had long given up its fight for life. She had been dead for such a long time that rigor mortis had set in. Rigor mortis will take approximately 2 hours to affect the facial muscles before spreading to the rest of the body, with the process completing within 6 to 8 hours after death. Trying to save her life was heroic by police and paramedics, but there was zero chance they could save her. She was formally pronounced dead at 4:30. Jack portrayed himself as someone who may have been clinically insane, even calling himself psychotic. But as we learn more in this case, we see that it simply wasn't that straightforward. This young woman had been subjected to a horrific ordeal for months before her final tragic end. Ashley had been stabbed no fewer than 90 times. The autopsy also revealed how bravely she had fought back during her final moments. Defensive wounds were found on her hands, arms, and wrists where she tried to fend off the knife over and over again. The vast majority of stab wounds were located in Ashley's chest. There was no doubt that Sepple had intended to kill her from the start. One chest wound is enough to kill a person, but dozens of them leave no room for reasonable doubt. All of her vital organs, heart, lungs, and liver had been cut to ribbons. On top of this, they found bruising on her neck, consistent with Sepple's admission that he had strangled her. Other injuries also revealed the true extent of the horrors Ashley had experienced over the last weeks and months. Internal and external bruising was discovered all over her body. From her shoulders to her ankles, Ashley was covered in bruises. The bruising was so severe that it was reasonable to assume that Ashley had sustained regular beatings at least once a day for weeks, if not months. As far as the investigation went, it was an open and shut case, but the police still needed to piece together all of the evidence for the upcoming prosecution. They discovered that sometime around the murder, probably just after, according to the autopsy, Sepple had found time to upload a new post to Facebook. He changed his profile picture to a photograph of Ashley and himself smiling. Underneath, he wrote the chilling caption, "Mine forever." Again, a clear sign that Jack was not insane. He was simply a control freak who had lost control of his long-suffering victim. The message was clear. If he couldn't have Ashley, no one else could either. In his mind, she was now his forever because he had taken her life. This is a tragic tale that has played out so many times and continues to be played out. On this channel, we have seen it in the case of Hannah Clark and other crimes. We even saw it with Jeffrey Dahmer, who talked about ownership of his victims. Very sick people who believe they have a right to own another person. Forensic evidence was not hard to come by, of course. The entire bedroom was covered in Ashley's blood, and after a little bit more searching, they found the knife that had been used to kill her hidden behind a radiator. Naturally, the knife was littered with DNA of Ashley, and the handle had the DNA of Jack Sepple. Sepple was interviewed 3 times by police investigators, but for hour after hour, he simply answered no comment.
Did you even say to PC Mills, I strangled her and stabbed her, or has he just made it up?
No comment.
The interviews, of course, would still be entered in as evidence, but police felt they had Sepple dead to rights. What was most shocking to police was a video they discovered on his phone taken at 12:45 p.m. Jack Sepple was already covered in blood and Ashley's body lay in the background. This was nearly 4 hours before anyone else arrived, which explained the rigor mortis that had set in at the time the emergency services got to the scene. The message in the video was a simple apology for murdering Ashley. What was really sick was that the video was addressed to Ashley's sister. Could you imagine somebody killing a family member and then sending you a video of them next to the dead body only to apologize? The only plus was that he didn't actually send the video. Whether he intended to or not is unclear.
When you told officers you were sorry, I would suggest that was admission to you killing Ashley. Did you kill Ashley?
No comment.
Maybe it was part of Jack Sepple's strategy to get himself certified as insane. This would have meant he would serve his sentence in a secure hospital rather than a regular prison. He was sent for psychiatric analysis, but the psychiatrist said that he was perfectly fine to stand trial. They did establish, surprisingly, that he did have mental issues, but not to the extent that he could plead diminished responsibility and try to get off with manslaughter. This left him no room to maneuver, and for the first time in his life, Sepple did the decent thing. He pled guilty to all of the charges. Not that he had much choice, of course, but pleading not guilty would have subjected Ashley's family and friends to a jury trial, which would only have added to their torture that they were already suffering because of him. Let's not give him too much credit. It is entirely possible, if not probable, that it was not an act of mercy towards Ashley's family on Jack's part. It was more likely that he had entered into self-preservation mode and believed that by pleading guilty he might get a lighter sentence. While on remand awaiting sentence, Jack Sepple decided it was a good idea to write Ashley's family and issue an apology to them. He tries to say that his mental health is not good and that is what led him to killing Ashley, again saying that he was sorry. Firstly, there was no chance that the family would forgive him. Secondly, it seems remarkable that he was even allowed to make any contact with the family of his victim at all. But thirdly, it has to be considered as to whether this was just another attempt by Sepple to prove to the courts that he had remorse for his actions, in hopes of getting less years behind bars. Either way, it wouldn't do him much good in the long run. The sentencing hearing took place on the 10th of October 2022 at Chelmsford Crown Court. Ashley's family were also in attendance. The devastation of Ashley's murder had hit so far and wide that when the family went to the airport to book their flights to England, a lady at the booking desk who did not know them saw their surnames on the booking and began crying at the desk. Despite Jack's efforts to spare himself a longer sentence, Judge Mr. Justice Edward Murray had zero sympathy for him. 23-year-old Jack Sepple was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years and 6 months of time served while on remand. He was described by the judge as a coward, and the attack was described as brutal. Even when his time comes to an end, it is far from certain that the then 47-year-old Sepple will walk the streets. Many say he should have no chance at parole at all. As the sentence was read out, just as he had behaved during his interviews, Sepple showed no emotion or signs of remorse at all. He just sat still and quiet, staring at the floor. There can be no greater testament to Ashley's personality than the impact she made on the people around her during her short time in England. She had only been in the country for less than 4 months, but the outpouring of emotion and sadness was remarkable. Vigils were held in her honor, displays of candles, flowers, teddy bears alongside photographs of her littered Tennyson Road. Only someone with such warm and loving personality as Ashley could have commanded such a reaction from the public. Because of this tragic case, Essex police have begun putting into place new efforts on how police assess the risk posed by domestic abusers. Detective Superintendent Matt Cornish of the Essex Police Department said earlier this year, "Our commitment to Ashley is to do everything we can to ensure that something like this can't happen again." Statistics in the UK show that 7% of all women and 3% of all men have experienced some form of domestic abuse, so a review into increased powers for officers to intervene would certainly not be a bad thing. In another tribute to Ashley's character, the public heard of the fees facing her family to repatriate her body. In response, an appeal was set up to raise money to help fly Ashley's body home. The appeal spread across the UK and Canada. In total, approximately 40,000 Canadian dollars or 23,000 pounds was raised for the family, who issued a public statement thanking everyone for their generosity. Since her daughter's murder, Ashley's mother has been campaigning to raise awareness of victims of domestic abuse. She wants to make sure that anyone who is a victim knows there is no shame in coming forward. In her own words, she said, "It's too late to save Ashley, but it isn't too late to save yourself." For anyone watching this case who even questions whether they might be the victim of domestic violence, call someone, call a friend, a family member, a helpline, or emergency services. Do not suffer in silence. Do not let Ashley's death be in vain. In a very touching and emotional message to her deceased daughter, Ashley's mother had her buried not 6 feet below ground, but 12 feet below ground. This is because when the time comes, she will be buried on top of her, saying that they will always be together, if not in this life, then in the next, for all eternity. Rest in peace, Ashley Wadsworth. Thank you for watching. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment down below with your take, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.